In this tutorial, BlocksCAD tutorial, we're going to make a cylinder of spheres. So we have a cylindrical shape, and on the surfaces are these spheres. So they're randomly colored, right? But we do have control over a couple of things when we render. So one thing we can change is the radius of the sphere. And we'll make this one a little bigger. We could also control the distance. This is essentially the radius of the cylinder, so how far from the center the spheres are. And we could also determine how many spheres we want. So I'll lower this. And also the stack or the height of the spheres, right? So this takes a little while to render. And once it renders, as you see, everything's been updated. We only have a stack of 4. The spheres are a little larger and further away from the center. So let's start making some variables. The first one is the radius, which is the radius of the sphere. The next is the diameter of the sphere. We'll need that when we start stacking these, right, for the spacing, you'll see. And so the diameter is twice the radius. The next is the distance from the center that the perimeter will be, right, of the cylinder. And then the angle and the number of spheres. So spheres will make 18 at the beginning, and then the angle between them will be 360 divided by 18. So if you change the number of spheres, the angle will automatically update. So let's make a few of these. The first thing is we'll make a loop, right, through the number of spheres. Then we'll need the x and y position of each one. So that's going to be based on a trigonometric function, cosine and sine, and the distance from the center. So we'll have to daisy chain a formula together, right? And the formula will be the distance times the cosine of the angle that we want. And the angle is going to change, right? The angle is going to be 20, 40, 60, 80. That's why we have multiplication here. So the y position will be similar, and except it'll be sine. So now let's do the translation, but we need a sphere. So we're going to make a sphere into a function or a subroutine. So let's give the sphere some color. So we'll declare 3 variables, R color, G color, or red, green, and blue, right? We'll make it random. We'll set those variables up. And the next things, once we have those variables, we want to use this little function here called sides. We want to make the sphere a little bit round, so we'll increase the size to 32. And then we'll make the sphere. And the next thing, we'll make that into a function called sphere, bring everything in, and now let's call the function, right? Let's call it and let's execute it, and let's see what we have, right? Okay, so something went a little wrong here, and it looks like the radius is okay, but that has to be division, right? And this has to be multiplication. So 360 has to be division, xy has to be multiplication. Okay, so if you change that, you'll see it'll work a little better, right? All right, so now let's make a stack of these. So we're going to make a new loop, a Z loop, right? And we need to now know, well, how the length of the stack. So we'll call that height, and we'll make it into a number, right? So maybe like 7 or 8. So in this case, it'll be 5, right? And we also want a gap between the stacks, right? So we'll call that H gap, and we can make it into something small like 4. Okay, so we have our variables, and now we need to calculate our z value. So our z value will simply be z times the diameter plus the height to raise this new set of circles above the previous ones. So it should be the diameter plus the gap, and that has to be multiplied by z. So we'll put that into the z slot, and let's check it out. All right. So this takes a little while to render, but I see they're stacked on top of each other. So forgot to make that into a times z, right? And let's try it now. So there you go. So this looks okay now. So let's try to change a couple of things, right? And if we increase, let's say, the number of spheres, right? 36. So that's a pretty big number. We don't have to touch anything else. And if you render, it takes a little while. So let's come back. And this is what we get. We get a bigger stack and more spheres.